Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Wellness Webcast, sponsored by Am Neal and Keo Kieran. Today, we're going to be talking with two couples about their experiences with dating and Parkinson's. Before I introduce them, I'd like to mention that because we're doing a panel discussion, you may want to adjust your presentation view on Zoom to a gallery view. That's if you don't like to see the screen flipping between the main speakers. I also want to apologize. I'm getting over a cold, so I'm sorry if I sound a little hoarse or sniffly. But now on to the main event. We have two wonderful couples that will be sharing their stories today. We have Allison and Stephen from North Carolina. They've both experienced relationships pre and post diagnosis and are currently blending families while managing Parkinson's. We have Steve and Susi from Oregon, who met after Steve's diagnosis. Steve has experienced divorce and dating with Parkinson's, and Susi can share what it was like entering a relationship with someone with Parkinson's. So I'd like to start with each couple sharing a little bit about their Parkinson's history and their relationship, and then we'll move on to some discussion questions. So for anyone out there, if you have any questions you would like to ask, please put them in the chat function and I will try to get to them. So Allison and Stephen, why don't I have you guys start? Share your Parkinson's stories and a little bit about your relationship, how you met, and then we'll move over to Steve and Susi.
So I'm Allison. Hi.
I'm Stephen. Nice to meet you.
I also go by Allie on Facebook. There's a lot of people with Parkinson's that I communicate with. So back in 2010, April of 2010, I was married, and April 2nd, I had a gorgeous, beautiful baby girl, and that's also when I noticed my first tremor, April of 2010.
December 2010, I'm married 1,100 miles away in North Carolina. She was in Texas. And I experienced my first tremor at the birth of my second child, my son, in December of 2010, the same year.
So from there, he gets diagnosed the following year. I end up not getting diagnosed, trying to ignore it. And it wasn't until New Year's Eve of 2014, 2.5 months after my divorce, that I was diagnosed. So I dated, and it was awful. I was searching for my soulmate. And so in 2020, the pandemic happened, and I wrote a prayer, and I said, God, I give you my soul as you prepare it. I'm no longer going to look for my soulmate. I know you're preparing him for me. Until then, I will only seek you. And that was, we think, approximately May 20th of 2020. I nailed that prayer to the cross. 4 days later,
I bought property on a road named Allison Street close to my hometown to build on a home for starting over after a divorce. And I was going to start over with my children and not just a home for us. And I bought it on Allison Street. And it just so happens the bank kind of drug their feet from between May and August when I was ready to build, but I couldn't. It seemed like everything was tied up. And then I reached out to this beautiful woman here.
We were connected. Actually, one of his friends looked me up, non-intentional, just started looking up Parkinson's and dating. And I had written an article about dating with Parkinson's. And
he said, have you ever looked into that? And I said, well, no, but by the looks of that pretty blonde in the thumbnail, I think I might be interested. So I looked into it and read about dating with Parkinson's and this beautiful girl beside me. And I was hooked, so I reached out to her. And
we finally met in person in October of 2022. 2020. And October 8th, 2022, we got married. So 2 years after that.
So just in case you're confused about this is really weird. We both have Parkinson's disease. We both started showing symptoms in 2010. And
we both live on my street with my name.
And I've had a dog for 6 or 7 years now named Allie. I've had it way before I met her. So it's kind of.
So if you're not convinced that this is we are soulmates. We've got more.
Yeah, we won't bore you with all these details.
That's such a beautiful story. I just love it. It gives me chills. Thank you for sharing that.
No
So,
problem.
Steve and Susie, why don't I pass it over to you? Share your little bit about Parkinson's and your history and background.
Okay. So going back to about 2013, that's when I first started to experience some symptoms. And I did not have pronounced tremor, but my speech pattern had changed dramatically. And so I remember in the spring of 2014 getting MRIs and just trying to investigate what's going on. The advice from my doctor was just slow down. You're taking on life a little too hard. Of course, 2014, my first marriage disintegrated and I ended up getting divorced. And immediately after that, I started dating somebody. And then fast forward to April of 2016, I got diagnosed with Parkinson's. Things had progressed and, I knew something was severely wrong with me. I can remember my diagnosis. I went into the neurologist and I was sure I had ALS. And, I was so nervous that I was going to get this death sentence of a diagnosis. When he told me I had Parkinson's, I hugged the doctor and neurologist stepped back. He goes, I've never seen anyone react that way to this diagnosis. Of course, then I went home and did a little research on the internet. And I think we all know you should not do that or do it with extreme caution, because then I became terrified of what my future might look like. The relationship I was in at that time was long distance. I was living in Illinois. She lived in Oregon. And I remember calling her to break up. And she told me, that it wasn't my decision. She would love who she wanted and she would take me, disease and all. So long story short, we got engaged and got married. 2 years after that, divorce. So it didn't work out. I think there was a couple competing things. Number one, I was just really getting used to the notion, that I had this progressively debilitating disease. Number two, I was coming out of a relationship and I just slammed into another one. And it didn't end very well. But the good news is it put me out here in Oregon, which is, if you haven't visited, I could be his tourism spokesperson for the state. It's beautiful, especially the western part of the state. At any rate, my son came out from Illinois to visit me shortly after the divorce. And he's like, Dad, you can't live alone. I'm going to put you on these dating apps. And so I started dating online. And then, Susie, if you want to take it from here, you can talk about how we met.
Oh, okay. Well, I am a mother. I am divorced, and I am a mother of two. I dated also, and it was disastrous most days. And so I gave up. And so one of my friends decided to sign me up online, didn't tell me what she was doing. And she's like, you have to just stop and just, do something good for yourself. I'm like, I don't need anyone. I don't want to do this. I can't, because divorces are just hard and they're sad and they're heartbreaking no matter what happens. But anyway, so all of a sudden I got a Bumble app on my phone. So she started to tell me how to work it. And look, I'm like, okay, I'll do it one time. Well, the one time was disastrous. The second time was even worse. And then one Saturday morning, I decided, you know what? I am so done with this. I don't want to do this. I can just be a mother, be alone. I'll be okay. I've done it all this time since my ex-husband was pretty terrible to me. But, I was who I am. And I thought when I was in church, and this is funny, when I was in church, I'm like, I'm just going to sit in God's waiting room and wait for the right one. And
I used to tell people I was dating Jesus.
Yeah. And then Saturday, here comes this cute little man with these little dinghy balls.
St. Patrick's Day. They were shamrocks.
And that says lucky. And I'm like, oh, great. Not another one. So you have to swipe right or left if you don't like it. and right. Well, it accidentally swiped right, and it said connection. I'm like, oh no. And so it connects you. And so we talked probably all Sunday.
Yeah.
And it was in the middle of COVID. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know. I really don't know. And so once we met, it was like, want to accidentally run into each other at Walmart? I'll go to the cat aisle and you go to the Pop-Tart aisle and we'll meet there. And I was like, no, you could just come over. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know, because you don't know who you're dealing with on the other side of the fence. And so I was like, oh, great. I'm going to get into this mass murder thing. It's going to be disastrous. And he walked through the door and I just kind of knew there was something calming about him, but I didn't know what. And I said, this is it. And then my cat, Harry Potter, kept eating hard. And so that's how our night went.
Yep.
We drank.
Yeah, and on that first meeting, in person, I told her I had Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And I had been on several dates before, and my general policy was if I wanted a second date, I would tell the person I had Parkinson's. If I thought it was going nowhere, I'd just keep it to myself, move on, no big deal, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
So Susie, when he told you he had Parkinson's on the, after your first meeting, what did you think?
Well, nothing really. I mean, I've studied a little bit about it, but I don't know a lot about it at that point. And so I was thinking more about, I just enjoyed him so much that it didn't matter what he had. Mm-hmm. And that I felt like, if he told you and he's honest with you about these things, then, it's in your best interest to, figure it out. And so that's kind of what I've done. And I mean, it's just been a great ride so far.
Definitely.
Did you educate yourself or did you rely on Steve to educate you?
A little bit of both, because he would tell me little things like, oh, I have to take pills, I have to do this. And, working as a nurse, I know. But like I said, I didn't realize. Now that I do realize, I can look in his eyes and just say, hey, we need to give you a half dose.
Wow, that's cool.
I'm his drug dealer. He's mine.
At any time, did you feel a little, cautious or trepidatious about continuing that relationship?
No.
Good. Okay.
I mean, I just felt like, there's going to be good days. And I told him up front, I said, there's going to be good days and bad days for you. And whatever it is, whatever it costs us, I will help you as much as I can, but I can't fix it, as you know.
Yeah.
So, I think I've learned from looking at him and knowing that he needs a half dose or whatnot. I also know that food sometimes will mess up that cycle. Protein a lot, I notice. And if I don't give him that half dose before eating, sometimes if I know he's going to have a big meal or drink beer, then it's all over. And then sometimes it's like, no, I'll just wait for like 5 more minutes. And I'm like, no, you're going to do it right now.
See, I belong to her. She sounds like she's a keeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I talked to the neurologist and he said, you cannot overdose. It's okay. But I don't like that he feels that if I give him too much, he gets kind of antsy and feels like he's going to jump out of his skin. And that's not a feeling that anyone wants to feel. So I slowly back off. So I don't push it, but if it's really bad, I make him take it.
Mm-hmm. Steve, in the beginning, did you feel like, were you concerned about being a burden, or did you have any anxiety about entering a relationship with somebody who, you kind of had to teach about Parkinson's and what your struggle was like?
Yeah, I would have to admit, I I still have some nervousness because you never know what the future holds. You don't know, every case is unique, as you know. Everyone has different symptoms that hit at different times. And, I don't know what the long range looks like. But, as Susie's indicated, I feel like we're very both committed to each other. And that commitment to me means more than anything. And it helps me get through, when I'm having bad days and when I'm having good.
Did you feel like in the beginning you had to hide or suppress any of your Parkinson's symptoms, or were you kind of, once you admitted it, you just let everything show?
Yeah, a couple things. When I met Susie in the beginning, I had COVID, the shutdown had just happened. And prior to that, I was going to CrossFit in the morning and then rock steady boxing in the afternoon. And on the 3 days I didn't have rock steady, I would go to the gym in the afternoon and work out. So I was extremely active. And Allison, Stephen, you guys probably have experienced the same. When you're really active, you have a little more control over your body. And I would manifest a lot less, in the way of symptoms. But then as the lockdown progressed, I think, and Susie, you could speak to it, I think I showed a lot more symptoms.
Well, also stress is our number one enemy.
Yes.
And so, there was a lot of stress, a lot of unknown when COVID hit. So
Yeah.
I think that affected quite a few, and a majority in the PD community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Allison and Stephen, how did you feel about entering a relationship with somebody who has PD?
So I swore I would never date anybody that had the same disease as me. I
She
mean,
met me.
two wrongs don't make a right.
Yes,
like
I did.
that just doesn't work. And PD doesn't keep, it's not the glue that keeps us together. God is.
Absolutely.
But it's certainly, having been out there and dated with people that don't have the same disease, it was just shockingly comforting. We can just look at each other and, I'm like, what's wrong? Or, when was the last time you had your meds? Do you need to take your meds? And it'll be one of those things where, he's like, I just took them, like 2 minutes ago. And so we know, and we're in this together.
Do you feel that Parkinson's is kind of the main topic for you guys every day? And how do you keep your relationship and your identity as a central focus and not Parkinson's?
I don't answer the first question. I don't think it's a topic every day. It's not.
Mhm.
It's more like a general nuisance. And I don't know if Steve can relate to this, but to me, it's just a constant aggravation. It's just like, it's always there, and some days it's worse. And the fact that about the nutrition thing, I love to take a lot of protein and protein shakes and stuff, and they really fight the medicine. So yeah, it's not a constant. I'll let you answer number two.
Well, I have Parkinson's, so I don't remember question number two, but I would simply wrap that up with saying, when I was dating, there were, it was one of those things where, like, everybody has something. We have Parkinson's, it's defined, but everybody's battling something. And so, what I wrote in that article about dating with Parkinson's is, you've got to determine what you're willing to accept and from your partner, what you're willing to compromise, and how you're able to handle their disease, be it, narcissism, infidelity, alcoholism, shopping addictions, whatever, just stupidity, whatever your mate has, because nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed to me like, when I got in this relationship and we had so many commonalities and
Goals and values.
Our morals, our character were so in line with each other that trumped anything with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
So I had a question online, I think it was through Facebook, that somebody said, when your partner says you're not the person I married, we know that with Parkinson's, we are going through personality changes. What is your response to that, whether it's in your current relationship or with a past relationship? So kind of, how do you deal with these personality changes within these relationships?
I'm going to step aside because that has not been anything that I've dealt with, but you have.
Yeah, I would say that the only thing that doesn't change in life is change. There's always change. So people change. But I think Parkinson's is kind of like a magnifying glass for if you've got a flaw in your relationship, or any kind of flaw in your personality, or any kind of relationship issue, it will magnify it, just like a child magnifies the stress in a relationship. And if your relationship's not built on a fundamentally sound basis, in our case, our relationship with Christ, then I think it's going to be on a rocky, it's going to be a not exactly an easy road.
Right. That strong foundation is hugely important in any relationship for it to be healthy. And we had the luxury of a pandemic and 1,100 miles apart.
To get to know each other.
So we formed a foundation via communication, and communication is the number one downfall in most marriages. And I think, again, that lack of empathy, I can only imagine my partner saying that to me if they weren't empathetic. But again, like I don't have the experience with that personally.
Steve, did you have any experience with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, in general, my personality used to be very outgoing, very bubbly. And I think it contributed to the end of my first marriage, and definitely played a huge role in, that short-lived second marriage. But, I just became nervous and a little paranoid, and it did not play well, and I used to always have like a smile on my face. I used to call myself affable, and people just thought maybe I wasn't that bright or whatever because I was always in a good mood. That diminished significantly, and I had a stern look on my face. And I can remember on several occasions, my first wife, complaining to me, "We're out with friends and you're looking all pissed off and blah, blah, blah. You're no fun to be around." And, so I think it definitely contributed. At the time, we didn't know what was going on. And,
it's the mask.
Yeah, yes. Subsequent to diagnosis, there it was, just like you said, Allison, it was the mask coming down.
So I want to get back to some dating questions because I'm sure a lot of people want to know some of these things. So you talked about how you met each other. And so when you went on dates, you did the online dating, meeting through friends. Allison, when did you, and Stephen, when did you tell people you had Parkinson's? On what date? Or
so I got diagnosed, and 4 days later, I started my blog. So it originally started very cathartic, and I didn't publicize it. And then my niece publicized it on her Facebook page. And then all of a sudden I had like 200 subscribers. And I'm like, I haven't told my ex-husband, like all of this is just, and then I had, different organizations hitting me up. I had my doctor told me to start exercising. Before I knew it, I was on American Ninja Warrior. So all of this is to say that it takes 2 seconds to do a Google search on my name, and the jig is up. So I had to come clean pretty quickly. And when I would be on the online dating and I didn't tell them immediately, there were a couple of people that were offended and, how dare you? You're a liar because you didn't tell me immediately that you had a disease. I had, again, just interactions with different men that, the amount of shallow water in their lives is pretty deep. So, it just, like I said, dating sucked.
Steve,
I don't think dating would have been better had I not had Parkinson's.
Okay.
I think just there are people that are kind of crappy people.
Yeah. So Steve and Stephen, what were reactions you received when you told them about Parkinson's?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I didn't do too much dating between the end of my divorce and starting construction on the home because I was just in a bad place. I just didn't feel like messing with the whole dating scene. But the few times I did, I wouldn't say date, but reached out to some ladies. It became apparent after a few numbers and limited phone calls that they were not interested in dating somebody even as good looking as me. So just because of the fact that they don't know what Parkinson's is. So I think the lack of knowledge, and I let them fly on by. It was no big deal because I wasn't ready for any kind of relationship until I met this girl from Texas, and then things changed drastically. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
No, that was good. So I don't think I ever had any outwardly, at least directed to me at the moment I disclosed outwardly bad reactions. But I did have a couple instances where I was going to ask for a second date and then they became ghosts. Yeah. So, but that happened just a couple times. And, generally I'm still pretty upbeat. I just kept moving. There's no time for it until I met Susi.
How did you deal with the rejection? And then on the other side, how did you deal with the oversympathy? I'm so sorry. So, those two kind of scenarios, what would you say your experiences were?
Well, for me, just like you said, it seemed like it was one or the other. They were either overly sympathetic or completely, devoid of any humanity. So, it just seems like I had given up, that God just didn't have good men on this earth. I really given up. But, I don't see myself as having Parkinson's. I don't realize when I have dyskinesia. I don't really notice my tremor from an outside eye,
Hmm.
because it is what it is, and I don't really reflect upon it. I do remember someone freaking out. I was having dinner and I was looking for my medicine in my purse and it got lost. And I started having a panic attack.
Hmm.
And it was clear at that dinner that they were not prepared or wanting to go down that road. You know, he was like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I can't find my medicine." Like, for us, medicine's life.
Big deal, yeah.
I mean, we watched a show, a very depressing show, last week on Netflix, and this girl was like shipwrecked, but she had a plane crash or whatever. And it's like, what would we do in that scenario? Like, that's a death sentence to us because of no lack of medication. So you know, I threw myself into activities. You know, I tried to be the best mom, the best employee, and just get over those losers as quickly as I could.
I have more questions I'm going to go through, but again, for anybody out there, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat function, and you can reach the chat function at the bottom of the page. There'll be a little menu that pops up, so go ahead and click in that. Susie, I wanted to ask you, what would you say to somebody who is starting to date or enter a relationship with somebody who has Parkinson's? Do you have any advice or encouragement for them?
I would say, you know, I mean, one, if you feel like you have interest in them without knowing this, be open to what they, you know, what they go through and what, I mean, I don't know. I guess when he first told me that, I don't think I really thought of anything like that, except for that, you know, he's a human being and he needs love and he needs this and he needs that. But whatever, with the Parkinson's, you gotta be open with it. And if you can't take it, you should walk the other way, because you can't bring somebody along, because that's not nice, you know, and it's not fair. But I mean, I guess it's like anything. If I had, I don't know, seizures, I guess, I mean, I would have to be open to that, because if I fall over on the ground and then that's a big old surprise and you're dating someone, you probably should be open to that, you know, and then you can go you can pick from there what you want to do. But I mean, obviously, if you enjoy their company and enjoy their personality and all the great things that come with someone that you want to be with, then be open to everything else, because if you're not, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and I used to always think, you know, with those people, you know, I never said this to them, but I always thought, what happens to you when you get diagnosed with cancer? You know, what is going to happen to that person if they're not open to seeing us for, you know, people? You know, I feel like we are way more productive than most anybody else healthy that I know. So, you know, that
Empathy.
lack of empathy, yeah. It just it plays such a role in a relationship.
I feel too, like, you know, I just look past all of the you know, the obvious, because there's so much more to care about than just the obvious, and focusing on that and making that person feel uncomfortable or badly, you know. There's so much more in life that you can look at. Yes, you can care. Yes, you can help them. Yes, you can do this. But I feel like people just don't get it sometimes. You know, I don't know.
One of the frustrating things I experience is the onus of having to educate people about Parkinson's and the nuances of it, because everybody has that image of Michael J. Fox, and it's like, oh, well, that's just there's so much more to this. So when you were dating, how did like I said, I get tired educating people and I want them to figure it out. How did you educate your dates? Or did you feel you had to, or was there anybody worth where you had to tell them more about
at first I felt like it wasn't my place to say anything about his health because, one, it's a HIPAA thing, I suppose. Two, I feel like I need permission to do that because I'm not going to say, oh, bring him into my work and go, oh, he has Parkinson's and blah, 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 blah. And I have medicine in my drawer, so I have to give him some medicine. That's not for me to do. That is something that Steve needs to give me permission to do. And a lot of my coworkers know that he has Parkinson's, but in the beginning, I didn't think that was not my place, so I didn't, if he was having a symptom, it was his place to say something. Hey, I'm not feeling very good. Here's what I have. And, eventually he did tell me that it's okay. But I don't know. I felt so uncomfortable doing that at that time, but
yeah. And go ahead, Allison.
I was just going to say, with educating past people I dated, none of the relationships lasted long enough for it to be an issue.
Yeah, and with Susi, it definitely was easy because she did a lot of self-education. And now I feel like she's a spy. She'll have patients come in and she'll say, I bet you they have Parkinson's, and she'll ask, and sure enough, she'll be right on. And she sometimes introduces me to them. Actually, one of them I found my way because locally to him, he's participating with Rocksteady here in Salem. But yeah, it's pretty interesting because she did a lot of research. She tried to get me to the best neurologist. I mean, she goes the extra mile. There's no doubt about it.
So dating, what would you recommend as the best activities or dates for somebody with Parkinson's?
Tambourine practice.
Mariachi.
Yeah.
Yeah, maracas.
For a fun night, an interesting night, go axe throwing.
Oh, that worries me.
You make it back alive, it's a win.
Yeah. Well, I don't think when you're throwing the axe, you have to worry. It's the other people that are in the area that might have to run on.
It makes for an interesting night.
If you're not incarcerated, it's a good night.
Yeah, there you go.
I would say anything that's involving movement, like going to a concert where you can get up and get down and move around, and any outdoor activity.
What's a date where you were kind of like, oh, I just, I don't know if I can sit through this or do this?
So it was like brunch on a Sunday. My meds were not working properly, and I was trying to sit on my hands. How many out there sit on your hands?
I would raise my hand, but I'm sitting on it right now.
And that wasn't working either. So it made for an interesting brunch. And I did not have a subsequent meeting after that.
What about you, Steve? Do you have any date activities that you recommend, or that you say just it causes too much stress?
Well, see, it's interesting. Like you mentioned axe throwing. I've definitely done some cornhole dates. They don't work well. Probably it's all on me because I used to be a very competitive person. And, stress is your enemy. And when you're trying hard, you're stressed out. And yeah, things just seem to fall apart. but you know, traditional dating, I don't know, Susie, have you ever noticed me uncomfortable in any situation?
No.
Yeah, I think most normal things, going to dinner, it seems fine. Meeting friends seems fine.
Mhm.
Some,
What's that?
maybe some friends.
Yeah.
Let me see what's my next. So again, anybody have questions, please feel free to ask them. What did you learn about the dating process? So before your diagnosis and after your diagnosis, what have you learned about yourself in entering relationships? Meaning, do you feel like Parkinson's actually made you better at relationships?
That's an interesting question. One thing that I thought prior to my diagnosis, I was like a very confident person. And all of a sudden I took a step back and had to relook at myself. So personally, I think I'm a lot more engaged and plugged into my relationships than I may have been in the past. And, that would be one distinct difference that I could think of that comes to me.
And for me, Parkinson's has just added more living day by day, appreciating the small stuff, appreciating the everyday, really trying to be present and, do as much as I can for as long as I can. But I think the best thing that happened to me as far as relationships goes was a divorce.
Sure.
Because when you're in a toxic marriage,
Yeah.
you really realize, once you get out of it,
Mm-hmm.
where the deficits were, not just with the spouse, but with yourself as well.
Sure.
What you took that you shouldn't have, and how you can do better and ways that you will do better.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I also want to say it's a shame that it took a neurological diagnosis for me to realize just how much I value the small things in life, and just how valuable it is to be on this earth and to live this life and to have a story to tell, and to, get up every morning, because life is so precious, and there's so many reasons to smile, even with the disease such as this. So, you take for granted things until there's a chance that, they could be taken away. So in some regards, it's a punch to the stomach, but in other ways, it's very beneficial. And I'm so glad to have met Allison. She's real.
I'm sure there's some couples out there that have just been diagnosed, and they're in, maybe some toxic marriages, and it's not, their partner may not be accepting their diagnosis or being as supportive. I know you were all pretty much divorced prior to your diagnosis, but what would you say to this individual, that person out there who's like maybe too scared to deal with their marriage, or it's just not, their marriage isn't working, and Parkinson's is the center of it, and they're afraid to go out on their own? Or do you have any advice for them?
I would say seek therapy, because, settling, I want to say that was the biggest issue for me with dating, is, trying to constantly remind myself not to settle, and yet I would still settle. Feeling like I had this, pink elephant in the room, and that I was damaged goods.
Mm-hmm.
And, on my own, I was a single mom working full time, doing it by myself in the 4th largest city in the United States. And like, we talk about this. I didn't need Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need a man, period.
Mm-hmm.
I was, whole all on my own.
Yeah.
So when Stephen came along, he added so much wealth, but he didn't save me.
No.
And I think that's the thing. The point that I want people to know is that they are not alone. They don't ever need to settle for toxicity.
Absolutely.
And like Stephen said earlier, that, if you have a crack in the relationship and that foundation,
Mm-hmm.
having a disease is only going to exacerbate what's already there.
That's so beautifully put.
To answer that question,
Yeah.
I personally, along the lines of what Allison was saying, settling for what you think is normal in a relationship can actually be abnormal, meaning how you've been allowed to be treated or how you've allowed others to treat you may not be normal, what normal is. We heard it recently, somebody was diagnosed with asthma, and the doctor said to the patient, I don't think you know what it feels like to be able to breathe normally. You've just settled for breathing this way. So we need to get you up to what normal is. And I believe it's that way in relationships, that once you choose to stop being treated the way that you really know in your heart is not the way you deserve to be treated, and you get out of it and you can look back on it, you can see that, maybe the Parkinson's was part of the problem, but it was a small part of what was a bigger wedge or a bigger crack.
Oh, that's so beautifully put. Thank you, Stephen. As we know, masking is a big part of Parkinson's. Do you feel that has inhibited any communication? Like, I kind of dread that symptom. I love my smile. I'm an expressive person. My husband jokes that all the pictures and screenshots he takes, I always have like the goofiest look. And that is we're such visual, expressive beings. So do you feel like that has caused, any difficulties with communications in your relationship?
I don't think it's caused any difficulties with ours, because I can read them pretty well.
Even a blank expression, if it's just a slightly different blank expression, she can tell he's a little bit upset or he's a little reserved or whatever. I don't know. Is that the same way with you guys, Steve?
I was going to have Susi answer.
Yeah, I can tell when he's upset with me, but I also can tell when he's in deep thought too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's funny because you are definitely a very empathetic person, and
Wow.
in past relationships, it didn't work out that way. It was always I was upset, pissed off, and didn't want to deal with me. But yeah, with our relationship.
Well, I look at life too, and I appreciate life way more than I used to, because you make it better. You make me a better person. I learned from you a lot. You help my children. You make them better people. And I appreciate that so much. You don't even know, because I lived in a torturous marriage that was just toxic all the time. And I walk around being toxic. I hate to say that, because I didn't love myself at all. And when you don't love yourself, you can't love somebody else, no matter if they have anything or not. It doesn't work.
Value in yourself as well.
You have to value yourself, and then you can be able to take care of everybody else that you love and that surrounds you with, support and love and all kinds of things. Because if you don't have that, you don't have anything.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. Thank you, Susi. I had a question on Facebook again, and they wanted to know, do you sleep in the same room? As we know,
if he doesn't score, just kidding.
Or hit her. There's been a couple occasions that I've hit her.
Yes.
I find out in the morning. It was totally unintentional, but
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I baffle her, but that would be the only reason. It's not because we're mad at each other by any means.
Yeah.
Well, he wants a smaller bed. We had a king. Now we're in a queen, and he actually sleeps in the middle of the bed, so he can be right up against me.
Right. I need a
So when I start acting out my dreams, that's going to make for an interesting marriage.
This is a fake tooth, and this is a fake tooth.
Yeah, well, we have the queen. We could just switch.
yeah, I should be in a king. I'm
This
pretty
is my
tall.
queen because he's so tall.
My husband wants to upgrade to a king too, and I'm just like, honestly, I don't want to make a king size bed. Allison, we have a question that just popped up, and it says, that I'm not a bar hopper, and friends ask me why I can't meet a nice guy at church, and she'd love to, but that hasn't happened. So, so all of you, this is not just Allison, all of you, other than maybe the online recommendations for meeting people, what would you recommend?
So, if you're not wanting to do online dating, which I totally get, I think the best way to go about it is ask all your friends and family, anybody that's in your inner circle that really knows you. And just ask them, say, do you know, think about it. Do you know anybody in your circle that, you think would make a good match? That's how I met my first husband. Of course, neither, we didn't know each other well enough, but meaning the person that made that love connection. But I would say they're the best. Your circle is your best guide, because they're going to know you better than a map.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what would you recommend for trying to meet people?
Well, I did the online dating probably exclusively. I mean, before I moved out to Oregon, I was put on permanent disability. So suddenly when you're not working, I volunteer for a food bank. I was going to Rocksteady Boxing, but that whole world that I used to live in that was filled with people became much smaller. So it became much harder to meet people. And I think, like Alice said, if you go to your circle of friends, you're going to have, I think, much better outcomes because they tend to have the same outlook, goals, morals as you, unless they're a friend because they don't have those things. That could be something completely different. But I think for the most part, engaging friends, that's a good source.
Well, and I was just thinking another good place would be, wherever you have hobbies. So like I had hobbies, going to the gym and working out, or, joining a devotional group, like a prayer group with the church.
Maybe trying another church, a bigger church.
Yeah. I mean, hobbies are a great place because people are doing what they love to do. Mm-hmm. It's versus like at a place of business, that kind of thing.
What do you wish your dates had known? So I'm going to just ask a couple wrap-up questions. So generally, going into a date, is there something you wish your date had known prior?
Just what Parkinson's is,
Okay.
Just
how to be a decent human being.
awesome.
What do you wish you had known prior to dating with Parkinson's?
That I needed to keep an open mind, and that somebody with the same disease would be incredible.
Steve,
I think I just needed the patience, and just wait to meet the right person. And then I met Susi.
That is a great point, because when I got diagnosed, I was in my late 30s, and I'd just gotten divorced, and I'm like, if I'm I'm on a time crunch here, because if I want to have another kid, I've got to find my soulmate, now, and I've got to have that baby now. And now I don't want to have a child, even though we could. So
it would be an amazing child to be like a superhero.
I know, Susi, you're going to have to get going soon, so I want to ask you this final question before the others answer. What advice would you give about dating to the people watching out there? What's some advice you'd give about dating with Parkinson's?
I would just have to say, if you keep an open mind, like we talked about earlier, and educate yourself, because if you don't educate yourself and then things irritate you later, you haven't done the footwork, and don't make them do it, because sure, you could ask questions, sure, you can, see different things, but I've educated myself by just watching him. I mean, yeah, I could read all over the internet, but it might scare me because I worry about that kind of stuff. But just by watching him and his habits and his, his the functions that he has, when I guess just, I don't know, just personally educate yourself, because that's going to be the best answer, I think. But that's how I'd have a hard time letting someone help him as far as like taking care of him. I don't trust many people. And I'm like, when he travels, I'm like, oh God, who's gonna give him his medicine if he forgets? So I store pills in his pockets and the car, and then we don't have any medicine. I'm like, oh my God, they're all. But
that's just in Chicago, and I had to attend a funeral. She talked to my sister. And every 4 hours, my sister would say, "It's time, Steve. Are you taking your medicine?" I'm like, "Did she get to you?" And she goes, "Yeah."
I really have to go, you guys.
Susi, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking your lunch to meet and talk with us.
Nice to meet you guys.
nice to meet you.
Hey, Suze.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Bye-bye. So Steve, and then I'll ask Allie and Steven the same thing. What's your advice to the people out there who are wanting to date or needing to know how to enter this field?
So I'd say, number one, just do it. You can think, plan, rehearse, do everything you can to make it perfect. But if you just don't do it, it's not going to happen. And like Allison, you and Stephen were saying, everyone's got their thing. And it's so true. We have Parkinson's. It's very well defined, and we know it. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got their own other little thing or big thing. And you shouldn't feel like damaged goods, I don't think.
Absolutely. All right, last question, Allie and Stephen. What's your advice?
I would simply say, from my point of view, it wasn't until I gave it to God that my soulmate came. And so, have patience and give it up.
I agree with that 100%. I'd say do work on yourself as far as, become the best version of yourself, which in my case was handing it over to God as well, and just working on me. And then it was like he handed me this beautiful woman I'm very thankful for.
I can't thank you guys enough. Sharing these stories, being so open and honest and personal. I'm envious, not envious. I am honored and joyful in your relationships and witnessing this love and this empathy and compassion for each other. So I want to thank you to our couples for being so honest and sharing your stories. I hope everyone today enjoyed the webcast. Please join us next month, the second Wednesdays of the month, and we'll be discussing nutrition and Parkinson's with a registered dietitian. And we're going to work on how to develop a meal plan for the week. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.